My name is Luke. I am from Hertfordshire. I'm also slightly hungover from the pub quiz last night, so I will try and talk as fast as I humanly can to get through this, because this is a big topic. My pronouns are he, they. Content warning for my slides as well. There's a few moving images, but if you made it through Gavin's talk, I think you'll be okay. I'm also, as mentioned, I'm the lead design advocate at Zeroheight. And for those who don't know who Zeroheight are, we're a design system documentation and management platform. You can come chat to us out there. We have a stand. You can win a mechanical keyboard. That's not what I'm here to talk about today. Today, I'm here to talk about the magical world of tokens. So you might have heard, actually, I'm curious, how many people here have heard of design tokens before? Okay, a fair few. Who here uses design tokens? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So you might have heard about it. You might have heard some engineers talking about it. You might have seen some people online. You could just be staring at me blankly. So I know when I started to dive into the world of design systems, I was very scared of tokens. They seemed to be some kind of very strange magic that meant that I could push a button in design tools and it would magically appear in code. I didn't understand it, thought it must be really, really complicated. Spoiler alert, it is not. Basically, design tokens are a way of making sure that style values are kept in sync between design and code. It's kind of like synced spicy variables-ish. To understand it, the best way is to show you how it typically works nowadays. So you start off in a design tool, create a style, say something like color. You then use something like the design tokens plugin in Figma, or Sketch's inbuilt tokens manager, or zeroheight, and then link that up to a base token. And basically, this syncs the style value that you've set in Figma to a token definition in a JSON file. You then give this JSON file to your developers. Your developers, or the URL to the JSON file, I should say. You basically then write a script that references that tokens file, which then compiles that JSON file into variables for whatever platform you're using, whether that's web or mobile. Pretty much every flavor of web is covered off, and you use something like Style Dictionary to do that, which is developed by Amazon, really great. Don't understand what it does because I'm a designer. In theory, this means that you can make a change in your design tools and it can automatically appear in the code, which is pretty cool, but also not realistic. More likely, you have some kind of process in your organization for changing and releasing things, so you can set up basically continuous integration so that it looks for changes in the JSON file, creates a new pull request whenever a change comes through from the design side. So what can you turn into these spicy variables? So far we have things like color, typography, spacing, object styles like borders, gradients, shadows, backgrounds, animation properties. You can also have alias tokens, which are tokens that reference other tokens, meta. This becomes relevant later. And you can have composite tokens, which are a token that basically pull in from a bunch of different tokens and create a single token, which I'm not going to touch today. So, pretty cool, but why would you use them? So it should be relatively obvious, but this is one of the first steps in automating something in the product process that can actually make things a bit more efficient for everybody. So we're not talking about that like evergreen promise of outputting production-ready code from designs, because that strikes fear into the heart of every engineer, and quite rightly. It's not quite like that, because these things are all very tightly defined. They're very defined sort of variables that go through. It's basically the base of your design system. However, think about how many hours have been wasted when a designer comes up to you and says, I just need to change that one color value. And how long that takes to then go through all of the, workflows, approval workflows, testing, all of that stuff to get that live. It's really annoying, and this can speed that up. It also gets much cooler when you think about it from the perspective of large distributed teams with a bunch of squads working on different products. Because having everything in sync means that folks can always work with the latest version of whatever it is that you're tokenizing. It's a source of truth. Also, automation means that you can set up things like automated testing and reporting so that you can know what a single change will affect. You can also set up things like automated visual regression testing so that when you do change a token, you can see all of the ways that that's going to impact your product. It's pretty cool. It also makes it easy to theme. So this could just be creating things like light, dark, high contrast modes, but it can also be used to completely white label a design system. So I've seen it used for a fashion house where they've actually used tokens in their design system to create sites for over like 100 different brands that they own, which is pretty cool. And then also, when it's done right, you can provide an audit trail of design decisions that have been made, which is, not that sexy, but pretty important. And this is what I mean by more than spicy variables. Yes, tokens can be set up in a very simplistic way, but reducing them to variables is kind of like reducing responsive design to media queries. Just like responsive design encompasses a whole approach to design, design tokens are a technology-agnostic architecture and process for scaling design across multiple platforms and devices. But what does that mean? Well, when you're setting up tokens, you're essentially setting up an architecture for a lot of your base design decisions. Not only do these need to be interoperable between design and engineering stacks, but also need to be scalable for future to account for what might change. So one of the considerations to make is naming conventions, which I could do a 20-minute talk on alone, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to just give you a few things. Make sure that you're naming your tokens something that A, makes sense to both designers and developers, and also don't explicitly tie them to the values. So calling your token pink 500 might not work if you're then going to change your primary brand color. However, oh, not yet, I'll get to that. If you want to know more about naming conventions, I highly recommend this amazing article that Nathan Curtis wrote, where it's beautifully thorough. It takes about half an hour to read. But it's got a lot of information in there about naming conventions of tokens. The big thing that comes out of it is flexibility comes at the expense of specificity, and importantly, the precision of application. Yes, color button text success default might feel incredibly specific and only have limited uses, but similarly, just using color success as a name could be misused in a lot of different places and make changing values quite difficult because of the affected elements. The other thing in that quote was about process. So one of the main reasons I've seen tokens fail in orgs is because either the designers are trying to force it on the engineers, never a good thing, or the engineers have implemented it and not actually explained anything to the designers. So the only way that this can reach maximum effectiveness is when everyone is on board and understands it. And for that to happen, you need trust. And for trust, you usually need some kind of governance. Yeah, exciting. So you can set tokens up so that a designer can push a button and it magically appears on the website, but who would want that? As I mentioned, more likely you'd have some kind of process in the middle that allows for testing, review, approval before committing it as a source of truth. Source of truth. So, unfortunately, at the moment, most of this stuff isn't out of the box. Let's go tokenize the entire website and go skipping off into the sunset. So I mentioned at the beginning of this is the typical workflow that people currently do. I am really not happy with this. At the moment, 70% of folks who have any kind of tokens continuous integration only have it working from design to code. But in the future, we're going to have this amazing way that's going to be completely agnostic, and it means that you can store design decisions centrally. This can then be read in and out of design tools and code and whatever else comes around. There might be strings and do localization, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do. At the moment, there are 3 things that stand in the way of this. First off, tooling, easiest one. At the moment, the code side is pretty good. The design tool side, not that great. Part of the problem with this is standardization. So it's pretty easy to pull out things from Figma like color and typography and shadows because they're set up as styles. What do you do when you do spacing? There's no way of getting that out via the API. Or there are, but they're really hacky ways of doing it, which is not great. However, this is where the W3C come in. So there's a W3C community group on design tokens, and what they're doing is they're working with the big vendors, big design companies in the community to write a spec that standardizes a lot of these things, and then means that they all are singing from the same hymn sheet, and that we don't end up with the same that we had with IE6 and the browser wars, because token wars just doesn't sound fun or nice or interesting. So let's not end up there. Secondly, governance, as I mentioned it before. Slightly harder one because this comes down to processes and people, but also tooling. Sadly, there are no out-of-the-box tools that have good governance built in for tokens, which is a bit of a shame. But most of that is probably because a lot of this is still very young. We've only been around for a couple of years. So including zeroheight, the governance in zeroheight is pretty much not there for tokens. So I would be very surprised if this doesn't change soon, but I can't commit to anything. And similarly with other tools as well. I reckon this is going to change quite a lot in the future. But the governance piece is essentially, if we ever want to get to that idyllic state of a central place for tokens that can be written into and read out by any tool. Also, this kind of eradicates the source of truth argument of whether it's in code or design, because you have it in a single place, and then you can branch that, and it becomes very exciting. Finally, last one, and almost finished, culture. This is by far the hardest thing that I think that we need to shift. I'm involved a lot in design system community at the moment, and I can see some very serious trust and superiority issues when it comes to conversations between designers and developers. I'm not going to say which side it is, because to be honest, it's both. These need to be broken down if we ever want to get to a point where we can radically improve the whole process in product design. Part of this comes down to education and talking about the fact that we have a problem, but part of it is also about org structure and design, another exciting topic. So one little mic drop I'll put here, even though it probably sounds obvious to a lot of people, is that I urge you to refuse to be on a design systems team or start a design systems team that doesn't have design and engineering together. Both of these things are equally important if you're starting a design system. I could argue that content is an important third part of that as well, but that's a soapbox for another talk. So basically, what we're ultimately getting to with tokens and systems as a whole is a world where we can speed up the boring parts, make shit more efficient, spend more time crafting the bits that matter, realizing that we're all integral parts of this process and that journey is a good place to start, as it means we can fix the process and journey holistically, instead of only fixing small broken parts on each side of the design and engineering coin. And I'm pretty excited about how tokens can be a part of that. So thank you very much.